y'all? Everybody's tired. Yes, there's nothing like that first week of school tired for teachers or student teachers or faculty members. Yes, I'm exhausted too. But anyway, let me just ask if you have any questions on task 1. Nothing, we're good? Oh, yes.
Do you want it cited throughout the narrative or just at the end, like list your resources?
You can just list your resources at the end of each task.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Now, if you quote something, obviously you want to put it where it is, but yes.
Do you want them like just the URL, or do you want it like cited in APA or what?
We have said, I think it's APA
Yeah,
yes.
Is there a recommended length for the answers? Like I've been writing a few paragraphs for each, but I wasn't sure.
The only thing I can tell you is as long as you answer it. So, and I know that's not an answer, but if I tell you 3 paragraphs, someone could have done it in 1 and done it really well, and then they just blah the rest of the way through. Or if I tell you 3 and it takes you 5, then you'll miss it. So just the only thing I can say is once you go ahead and write whatever it is, and then go back and read it, and as long as you've answered each part and you've explained, then you should be fine. Anything else? Okay, I'm not sure whether we will get what we need today, but that's okay because he's holding one leg up and holding his tongue a certain way, trying to get a signal. I'm not sure he's going to get a signal. But anyway, hopefully you've had a chance to look at the TPA because you were supposed to have read it before today. So I'm just going to walk you through it. We may or may not get to look at the pieces, but if you're around somebody who maybe has a copy of it, I don't know, maybe you could look at it, but I'll try to talk specifically. So the first thing we're going to talk about is task 2. And task 2 has your standards and your goals. And if you look at the piece, not the template, but if you look at the piece that has all the directions, it tells you specifically what to do. So you have to come up with a big idea. This is where it lists the big idea, the standards, the learning goals, and the anticipated student challenges. So the big idea, we don't do that on our lesson plan format anymore in the College of Ed, but you do have to list that on your TPA. Okay, so it's just a overall theme that you're going to be using. And everybody looks at it differently, but I came up with a couple of ideas that I thought were pretty good to show you, but I guess I'll read them to you. But if you think of a concept that you're teaching, okay, and then you think of the big idea, and then you kind of go from there. A lot of people will say that the big idea can be used and changed around for different concept areas. For instance, this one says the concept is the revolution, and the big idea is conflict leads to change. Okay, so that's what you're talking about. It's not an objective. It is not a standard. It is not the students will be able to. Okay, that is not a big idea. So anyway, you're going to do that, and then you're going to go to your standards, and these are specific to your unit. Okay, now do you all know at this point, no one started their unit, right?
What are you showing? I can pull up.
I'm just talking. Okay. So go ahead and pull up their, let's do their template, because I can go back and forth that much. If you can only get one.
No, I've got it.
Okay. So then if you can go back and forth and pull up their template and pull up the directions. But do you know what you're going to teach? I feel like I'm so far away from you.
You can scroll.
Well, I know, but she's got to. So, you know what you're going to teach. All right. So, what you're going to do is, let's let me back off of this for a second, because you're going to give a pretest. So what you need to do is you need to write the pretest based on the standards that you chose to teach your unit, all right? Now, when you write that pretest, the best thing for you to do is to mark on each question, even if it's not the copy that the students get, but mark which goal it is that it's addressing. That way, at the end, when you have to record the data for the goals and all that, it'll be a whole lot easier. Now, if you give your pretest, and let's say it has 10 questions, and everyone in the class gets an 80% or better, and I just picked 80 just out of the blue, what are you going to do?
Change.
Okay, I hope you're thinking, oh, well, I've already written my pretest, I already know what my unit's going to be on, I'm going to go ahead and teach it. No, because you don't really need to teach that unit. They already know it. If they did really well on your pretest, why waste your time teaching it because they already know it? So yes, it's a lot of extra work, but you basically need to trash that and come up with something else, okay? Now, if you give your pretest, and let's say of the 10 questions, and I just made up 10, it could be 50 questions, whatever, and they did really well on 2 of them, but the rest they did not do well on, and you can tell they don't know, I would just eliminate those 2 questions. And if you want to add something else, maybe it covered a whole standard, so maybe you don't want to include this standard in your unit. But your unit is based on what you find out from your pretest, okay? Is that good? So, once you give your pretest, you have determined your standards and all of that. In task 2, you are going to, what we typically have said in the past is you're going to come up with your standards, and as a whole, you need to have at least 3 learning goals. Now, that's not necessarily per standard, but that's at least 3 total. You may have 20, but before you get all excited and think you want to have 20, you'll figure out before we're done here today that probably 20 is not what you want to have. But you have to have at least 3 learning goals, and then your standards are going to depend on whatever it is you're teaching. So you may find, you know what you're going to do your unit on. You may look and you may come up with 3 standards. Okay? Now, from those standards, you're going to write learning goals. And the standard is word for word what you get from the Department of Ed's homepage. All right? Please write all of that out, word for word, put the number. If you're not covering all of it, but you're only covering a portion of it, highlight it for us so we know what part you're covering. But from that standard, you're going to write measurable learning goals. And that is, the student will be able to. So let's say you picked 3 standards. And for standard number 1, you come up with 3 measurable goals that you want to measure in your unit. So you come up with those. Maybe the second standard, there's only 1 measurable goal you come up with. And maybe the third standard, there's 4 measurable goals that you come up with. Well, that's a total of 8 measurable goals that you're going to have, and you're clear because we're saying you have to have at least 3. We're not telling you how many standards you have to have. For elementary, you typically will have a lot more than secondary, okay, because you're covering all different content areas. So we're not telling you, obviously you have to have at least 1, but we're not telling you how many standards you have to have, but we are telling you that you have to have at least 3 measurable goals. Okay, does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so in this chart, this is in your template, right? Is this the template? Okay, so this is the template that you're going to be writing in or typing in. And so you're going to put your big idea. You're going to, over in the first column for standards, you're just going to copy and paste. Put the standard title, number, and all of that, and then copy and paste the standard word for word. And then here, you're going to, the student will be able to, based on your standard. So you may have one standard here, and then you may have 3 measurable goals from the same standard, and that's okay. And then over here, you're going to tell us, if you use Bloom's taxonomy or Murano or whoever you choose to use as far as your levels of your goals, tell us what level it is, okay? That is all. Directions? That's all explained in the directions under task 2. Over here. And you can see what you have to do. There's the copy and paste where I was telling you to do the standard. Here's your goals, and then identify the appropriate level. And then that's in the chart. And then after that chart, you're going to see a couple of questions that you're going to write narrative. Okay, so you're going to expand upon what you have in the chart based on what it asks. Yes?
For the goals, like if we have a lower level goal for one of the standards and then like an upper one for the main standard that we're using, do you want us to put it in order from level of goals or just in the standards? Like I'm doing a science unit, so would I put the science standard first and whatever the goals are for that, even though the goals might be higher than the English standard that I'm using?
I don't think it really matters, but whatever I'm concentrating on is probably what I would put first.
Okay.
And it doesn't really matter what order they are as far as levels go, but you want to make sure that you cover all, or at least the majority of the levels in Bloom's taxonomy and not put all factual level or, all lower level. Is that good?
Now, from a mechanical standpoint, you can add rows to this table if needed. That's all.
Okay. Just like we had said last week, if you need to expand it, or if you don't, if you only have 3 lines used and you don't like all that extra space, you can always take it out. Any questions then on task 2? Is this the scroll up to the questions, or the question?
Talking about the narrative question?
Yes. Because there is one thing in the template that, there's one thing in the tasks that's not in the template. There is not a column for the anticipated challenges for your students, but it does ask you that in one of the questions, so just keep that in mind. Okay. Any questions on task 2? Again, make sure you read the rubric. The rubric will tell you exactly what you need for the score that you want to get. Yes?
Okay, so I'm in just a math and science class,
Uh-huh.
so do I need to also include reading and social studies, like if it doesn't apply, or should I try to make it apply?
Okay, this is what I'm going to tell you as far as elementary goes. Some supervisors want your unit to include every single content area, including art, music, PE, etc., etc. Some do not. So instead of me making a blanket statement and then your supervisor come back and say, oh no, you don't have to do that, and everybody else is saying, well, wait a minute, she said, and he said, well, I'm going to ask you to ask your supervisor. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay, because some will want you to do maybe just one lesson, some will want you to do, not really, but every day, every concept, but, okay, so I would just ask him or her and see what they say. Other questions? All right, then let's move to task 3. Task 3 is your assessment plan. And this is the template that is in the part for you to fill out. And what you're going to do is you're going to, remember we had the first, I think it's the second column where you had to write, the student will be able to, your learning goals. All you're going to do is copy and paste those right here. So if you have 20, you're going to copy and paste all 20 of them. 20's too many. Okay? But whatever you have, you're going to copy and paste them right there. And then in this middle section for your assessments, you're going to tell us what are you doing to see if that student was able to achieve that learning goal. So your pre and your post assessment is your pre and your post test. So remember when I told you on your pre-test, mark each of your questions, if for no one else for you, which goal it addresses. That way, when you get here, you'll know exactly what it is instead of have to, oh my goodness, I forgot what I was doing. You might have more than one question on your pre-test that fits a particular learning goal. And that's okay. So what you're going to do then is it would be nice unless there are pages and pages and, the question shouldn't be. If you would retype those questions here, your pre and your post are going to be identical. Your pre-test and your post-test are identical. Word for word, identical. There are ways to figure out if students did achieve on a pre and a post without them being the same, but for our purposes, pre and post are going to be the same. So whatever you put here will be the same thing for your post. So you're going to say, question number 1, what are the primary colors? And question number 2, whatever it is that matches the learning goals. Okay? And then your formative assessment is, what is it that you are doing maybe in the classroom that is helping you assess whether they achieve that learning goal or not? Those of you that know me know I hate the word worksheet. But if you're using a worksheet to determine if they assess that learning goal, then you need to tell us what it is and you're going to attach it. Maybe you're doing some kind of collaborative project. Maybe I don't know. Whatever it is they're doing for formative assessment, you're going to list there. Okay? And then we get to this last column that says level of mastery. I'm just asking a question. Okay, so let's say that on the pre-test there are 4 questions that address and are going to help you assess learning goal number 1. 4 questions. So you've listed them here and you've listed them here. Of those 4 questions, just what do you consider mastery? What is going to say to you, oh, that student got it. I'm happy the student understood what I said or what we taught. That's a question for you. Pardon me?
What's it about 80?
Okay, so first of all, how can you get 80 out of 4 questions?
3 on 4. Yeah.
So you would say 75%? Would anybody say 50%? I mean, this is your judgment call. Some of you may say, out of 4 questions, no, they have to get them all right. And 80 is usually a pretty good estimate that people will go by. But if you have 4 questions, it's going to have to be all of them, because 3 will only give you 75%. So if in your head you're saying 80% is it, I don't care how many questions, then to you that means 4 out of 4. But what I want you to do, I just need you to think right now, because there's no right or wrong necessarily on this level of mastery. It's what you think is mastery. If you think 1 out of 4, 25% is mastery, and you're going to be happy, I might question that, but I don't know. That's what goes here. Okay? It's not what you want them to get. It's what you consider to be mastery. So after you do all of this, and you see, oh, I have 2 questions right here on the pre-test and the post-test for that learning goal 1. So you have to decide, is 0, 50%, or 100% mastery? And that's what you're going to put right here. It's going to be the same for the post-test. Because mastery is mastery. I don't want you to think that, so if they get a 50% on the pre-test, that's mastery, but they have to get a 100% mastery on the post-test. Mastery is mastery, whatever you think it is. It could vary on, oh, is that what you're going to ask? It could vary on learning goals. You don't have to say, okay, everything has to be an 80%. These questions right here might be worded in such a way that they are extremely difficult. Maybe it's an essay question or, something like that, and it's more difficult. And so for you, if they get 75%, that's what you're considering mastery there. But on these other ones where they just had to maybe list something that they probably have been working on forever, maybe you want 100% mastery. Okay? And that's the same for your formative feedback, or your formative assessment. Whatever you're doing, what do you consider to be mastery? Okay. Does that make sense? Good. Any questions on that?
Oh, yeah, I do. If you need more lines on this table, because of that big space where the learning goals are, if you run into trouble with that, just let me know and I can send you a table back that you can copy and paste to this place. It can get kind of a pain.
So we're good on task, 3? Cool, okay. All right, so will you scroll, so again, in this, after you do the template, then you have some questions to address about your assessment plan. Okay, remember, pre and post are the same, your pre and your post test are the same. You're just copying and pasting your learning goals, and then you're deciding what mastery is. Okay, cool.
I want to mention to paste the documents in YouTube.
Oh, yes. In this particular section, remember when I said whatever your formative feedback and your pre and post, you're going to attach those in this task 3. So where it says, right here, it says paste documents, blah, blah, blah. So you're going to put them there. Some people will put just the blank pre and maybe an answer key or something like that. Whatever you put. Remember, if you use that W word and you think those are good assessments and you want to use those, you're going to attach them here. Some people every now and then will black out students' name. Anytime you put something in with students' names on it, make sure you black it out, or their name. You might put an example of something that they did here, but this is where you're going to put samples. We need to see the assessments that you're using, all of them. Whether you put an answer key or not, I don't guess it really matters. Yes.
So if you have them like playing a game, like a matching game with cards or something, just take pictures of the students and post the pictures of them playing that game?
You could do that. Now, if you get carried away with lots of pictures, you might be making this really, really big, and so you might want to put, if you want to attached in a separate file, some pictures of them actually playing it. But you would include directions to the game. Maybe if there's a map that they have to work on, or question cards or things like that, you would include those things here. Because there is a piece, is it below this? that says, yes, right here where it says, pace my assessment directions for the student teacher. So if there are directions maybe that you explain to them and they weren't written, you can write those down for the teacher and or the student. But feel free to take pictures of your students doing projects and things like that. And you just don't want to overkill here. Maybe a couple of pictures, but maybe a better idea would be to have a separate file, like you're going to upload your consent and release forms, and include pictures in that, and just put a little note here. My students, working on their projects, you can see pictures in another file.
Put them in a Word document, but don't just upload the pictures, because a lot of cameras make big file sizes.
So are we good? You're on top of things, Mrs. Priest. So again, read the rubric just to make sure that you know what you're doing and what is expected, and you're not left out thinking, oh, I didn't think I had to put that in there. Then we're going to jump to task 4. And task 4 is the design for instruction. This is where you're going to include your daily lesson plans and your unit, not your daily lesson plans, your unit for your TPA, etc. But there's also a piece here about your focus students. So you should be thinking, and maybe you have already selected a couple of students in your class to be your focus students. Don't think that your focus students have to have an IEP. That's not what makes them a focus student. Don't think that it has to be a male and a female. Don't think that it has to be a high level and a low level. Your focus students can be anything you want that you're going to differentiate between. Okay? It could be anything. But you need to know why you're differentiating them, okay? So on this particular template, you're going to talk about your rationale for picking your focus student 1 and 2, and then you're going to, that one says, you're going to describe your differentiation between the two, okay? You're also going to mark them when you keep track of the data, the pre and the post-test data. You're going to mark them just as focus student 1 and focus student 2. We don't want to ever use their names or anything like that. Any questions on that part? In task 4, if you go ahead and scroll down a little bit. You will, this one, again, you're going to include, right here, it says you're going to insert your complete lesson plan. Okay, so here's your template. You're just going to type in it. Sorry. You're just going to type in it like you would have if you were taking regular classes last semester or whatever. Again, you can expand it. There are 10 days or 10 lesson lesson plan things. If your unit goes more or less than that, then you can adjust it. Okay. So you might, if probably before you start typing in, you know how many days your unit's going to be, and so you can add to if you want. Please make sure that you pay attention to the highlighting, because the evaluators will look for the highlighting of the technology and the differentiated instruction and the strategies and the materials. Okay, just like you did in your classes last semester. Make sure you do that. I would strongly suggest that once your lesson plan format or your unit is done, that you look and make sure you didn't leave parts out. I have had students who left this entire column on differentiated instruction blank. And so they get to redo, which means that's a 1, okay? This is really to help you as you're organizing your thoughts and trying to get your ideas down. Yes?
In other classes for differentiated instruction, we've had to list like everything that would be possible. But do we just do it like specifically for our students in our class?
Yes. I would do it for students in your class and focusing on your focus students.
Okay.
Because you don't need to put something in there that you don't have.
Okay.
Yes?
For special education, can we put like student A through whatever and then just like point out our focus students? if
Yes.
they-
And when you talk to your supervisor, just make sure, I mean, I worked with the special ed group, I don't know, a couple semesters ago, but I think that she'll be fine with that. I think she'll like that. Anything else on the unit plan right here? You know your unit plan is how long, at least? Okay, 5 days. Other questions? So after you do that, because this will take up a bulk of the pages because you're doing your unit there, especially if it's more than 5 days. And it can be more than 5 days, all right? Don't think that you have to squeeze it into 5 days. And then you have questions that you are going to address about your unit, about your focus student, the use of technology, instructional strategies, consultation. You know, how did you come up with your idea for your unit? How did you come up with some of the activities that you did? So just make sure that you look at every single question. It's there for you. So just don't skip it. Seriously, I know you all think I'm making this up, but I can't tell you how many I've evaluated and it's blank. So I don't know if it was overlooked. That's what I tend to want to think, if you just got in a hurry and you overlooked it. Not that, I don't need to answer that one, it doesn't pertain to me, because they all pertain to you. Okay. And then again, how long? Just until you answer it. Until you feel like, I mean, when it says discuss or describe, you know, I'm wordy, as you all know, but you can't do that in a sentence or two. Questions? I hope that you don't have questions because you know what you're doing and you're right on, not that you're scared or panicking.
You're our best friends here. I mean.
I know.
And here's the thing, if you have a question, it's 99% likely that someone else will bring up the question, so.
And you know me, I'm not gonna yell. Yes.
You might just be me. I just feel like the meetings I don't have questions because I've looked at it but not so far in depth.
Okay.
To the point of I have every question.
Okay, and so you haven't, I mean, you really haven't started yet, and I get that. By the time,
Once I look into it,
Okay.
it's like, oh, okay.
so by the time you see me again, and I'm not sure when we're meeting, I think it's probably a couple weeks, maybe you'll have tons of questions. Okay, and that's fine. But what you don't want to do is wait until then to have those intro questions about your pretest, because by that time, you should be well into your unit, or at least getting ready to start it, have it written and all of that. And again, you know that you can always email me or email Mrs. Priest, and she will send it directly to me. And unless something weird's going on, I will do my best to get back to you within a day. Yes?
So this should start at the beginning, like the first week that you're really by yourself, like teaching everything, or is it?
Not necessarily.
I just didn't know, like, if you were planning on doing it 10 days, and then one day you just so happen, like, there's crazy stuff happening, you don't get into it, like, I just don't know how early to start that, so.
Well, what you kind of want to do, and maybe Mrs. Priest can give you a better idea, what you kind of want to do is look at when it's due, look at when you're taking over, and kind of work backwards to see, okay, if I start here now, you may say, all right, my unit is 8 days long, and I'm planning to do Monday through Thursday, because Friday we have a field trip, and Monday through Thursday, and Friday's gonna be our culminating, or whatever. And something may happen on Wednesday, school may be canceled. There may be some really cool thing coming to town, and the principal says, it's coming to our school, and so you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't do my unit. Those things happen. I mean, that's just part of a teacher life. So we're not going to penalize you because you said you were going to do it on Wednesday, and now it's next Monday that you have to do. So you just need to plan, but you don't want to wait until a week before you're leaving that placement to start your unit when your unit's 8 days away anyway, and that's on you. So I don't know that there's a date that is best to start, I don't know, but I'm sure your supervisor can kind of say, you probably should have your unit started by this time or something like that, would be my guess.
This may be a dumb question, but
No.
do you want this, like, in addition to your other weekly plans written out, or is just this okay, like, okay, so let's say you're just doing science, is it okay to just have these lessons, or do you want it, like, written on our other set of lessons too for the week?
So this that you're doing right here, this is just your unit for your TPA. You're going to be teaching lots and lots more. But this is just the unit for the TPA. That's all you're going to put into this. So as far as the lesson plans Mrs. Priest mentioned earlier, you've got to write a lesson plan for everything you teach. It may not, if it's not part of your unit, it doesn't go here. But you will have your supervisors, and you may want to say more because, am I saying it right? They'll be checking to make sure you have lesson plans for everything that you're doing. This is just the unit. That's all the TPA is the unit. Yeah.
As a supervisor lecturer, found that some of my, when I go in to check their binders, whenever I would go in to make observations, they said they didn't have lesson plans. They did their unit, but they didn't have their separate lesson plans for everything they were teaching, because they would say, well, I'm using the teacher's lesson plans. And that's not what we're looking for. Not at all.
No, I mean, I can, it's been 30-some years ago, but I can remember, yes, I had to do a lesson plan for every single thing I taught, in addition to, we didn't have the TPA then, but in addition to, we did have to do a unit and all that. So lesson plans and lesson plans and lesson plans and lesson plans and lesson plans. And I know you at this stage think, oh gosh, why do I have to write a lesson plan to, teach a spelling lesson? Well, because you're not experienced yet. When you get out there, I can remember, I had to write in the little box. And so I would just write everything just to keep me on track. That was still my lesson plan, even though I had already experienced writing all of this stuff out. This helped me plan and prepare so that I could just write little notes. I mean, if you had ever looked at the stuff that I brought to class when I taught, I still have a little note that goes with me every day to remind me I'm doing this, and this, in what order. Now, I don't necessarily have to write down my questions, and I don't have to write down my strategies, because I've got those. You'll get those. But right now, it's just getting you prepared and kind of helping you. It's kind of your little crutch helping you. If you forget or you freeze, you've got something to look at to help you know where to go. So you'll get to that point where you don't have to write these 2- and 3-page lesson plans for everything you do, but right now we gotta make sure you know what you want.
But you still have to write plans.
You do have to write plans. In some counties, in some schools, in some systems, some of them look almost as lengthy as what you're writing right now.
And you have to turn it in, I mean, your
Yes.
administrator checks them, you know, it's not something. Says
You
you have to
should-
write your plans in a little green book, because you're writing in the green book.
That's right, yes. No, and I still have some of those.
Yep.
Oh, yes. And principals will take them up maybe on a Friday, depends on your principal. Some take them up on Friday, so you're thinking, whoa, I want to use my weekend to write my lesson plans. No, you don't. You want to get them out of the way so that you can enjoy your weekend, which you're planning for next week. But some take them up on Monday, and it's a never-ending cycle.
And here's the thing, guys, if the principal comes in just to observe, they don't want to see the teacher lesson plans, they want to see your lesson plans if you're the one teaching, okay? If there's no walkthroughs or there's no a quick observation, they're not going to look for theirs, they're going to look at yours.
Because honestly, the teachers that you're with, I'm sure are great, but you have great ideas. And if you're using their lesson plan, then that means you are their robot. And when do you get to think on your own? When do you get to practice some of those cool things that you're dying to practice because you're following their plans? Other questions on task 4? I'm not really going to talk about 5 too much, although 5 is not a big deal, but I do want to mention a couple of things because you need to start thinking about videoing your lesson or your unit. I mentioned this last week, 15 minutes max. At 15:01, I'm not watching anymore. Dr. Watson is not watching anymore. No one is watching. So if your best material is at 15:01, you're probably going to have to do it over. I had this question come up just in the last couple of days. Actually, someone called me. It's a different situation, but over the weekend and asked, and I said, yes, we have had students who have had to repeat their TPA. That's why we make you do it in the first one, so that you have the second placement in case you have to repeat it. If you record your video, which will match your lesson or your unit that you're teaching now, and what is on the video is not what we've asked for, and you get 1s, by the time it is graded, there's a big chance that you don't have time to re-record that part to match the lesson, and so your only choice is to have to redo it in your second placement. So make sure you look, and I'm not trying to scare you, I just want you to make sure that you really concentrate on what task 5 says. If you look at the directions, the instructions on page 18, it lists 6 things. It tells you specifically we want to see because you're addressing them in the narrative. So make sure that you have those things on your video. And okay, I always use the wrong word. I'm going to try this week and think of the right word. As far as your video goes, you can't, we typically say you need to have the same clothes on because we want it to be from the same lesson. Now that doesn't mean wear the same clothes, for 5 days in a row. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to splice, right? You don't want to splice your videoing as far as editing goes, splicing it and trying to wiggle in the best parts. That's why we encourage you to record many times. Record many lessons so that you can make sure that you get what you need. And don't go in and just say, okay, I'm going to video tomorrow and whatever I get, I get. Look at what we're asking for so that you know, okay, I want to do the first few minutes and I want to do the last few minutes, but that's an hour. And so you kind of, you can pick and choose what you have to show us your best in there.
Yeah, let me expand on that a little bit. What we mean is, you can have multiple segments. So if you've got an intro to your class on Tuesday that's really good, that covers 2 or 3 of these things, and then on Wednesday you've got things about classroom misbehavior and classroom, how you're handling different other things, that's okay to have 2 segments. What she's talking about when she's saying splice is don't cut out a bad section of your 5-minute intro because you have a swear word inadvertently. Let's use bad. That happens.
So you would have different clothes on in that case.
Yeah, if it, what we've seen are examples where people try to tell us it's one continuous piece of film, and there's obvious distortions such as a change of clothes, or they're from one room to the side of the room to the other, and they're trying to say that's one piece of videotape, so they've magically poofed from one side of the room to the other. That's what we're talking about trying to avoid. You also can't put in bubbles and rainbows and special effects. Look at me bedazzle the class. That's not what we're looking for.
We want the real you. And so you slip and you mess up and you thought it was going to be the best piece. Don't use it. You can come back tomorrow and make it even better. Learn from that mistake. Yes?
So if that were to happen and it just went totally off the rails, you just want us to get rid of that whole thing and don't use any, even if there were good parts of it, just read it, is what you're saying. You're saying don't take what's good.
You can use, we just want it to be a continuous lesson.
Yeah, if we're talking about, here was 60 seconds that were really good, and then there was a 10-minute pause where I had chaos, and then there's another 60 seconds over here that was good, that's not a real good video example of your teaching. If it's 3 or 4 minutes of an opening, that's a good piece, and then something happened, and then you want to do something on another day or at the end of the class, that's okay. But if all we're seeing is 60 seconds or 30 seconds here, that's a real red flag that something's not right.
And for instance, maybe, maybe you had a really good intro and everything's going really well, and then you're doing a group activity and it takes maybe 45 minutes and all that's being recorded is you walking around checking on groups. That's great, but 45 minutes has already surpassed your time. You might want to show us a minute of that, but that might be a piece that you take out, because it's just too long. So remember, 15:01, we stop.
And I would suggest taping every day if you could. Because here's the thing, the day that you think it's going to be really great, it's not. It's not going to be, somebody's going to grow up. We have had kids with iPads, we have had iPads fall over, and this is a true story, shoot up an elderly PE teacher's shorts while he and another teacher talked about everybody in the building. That was the recording for somebody. Those things have happened, guys. So,
And that was not submitted, okay? But you're disappointed when you see that's what happened, because that was the best that you had ever done, and you were so proud of that lesson, and then you find out, that's what I got.
That's what I got.
Or you videotaped a bunch of kids you don't have consent forms for.
Yeah.
Right? That was a question that came again. You've got to get those consent forms, whatever you have to do. If you don't get them, they're not on video, because as soon as they are, something is going to happen and it's going to come back to bite you, and you haven't even gotten a job yet. You don't want that to impact your employment. Yes?
Going along with that, if you do have a kid that's not allowed to be recorded, they still need to hear the lesson. I already talked to my teacher about it, but
like you'll sit the kid away from the camera, but how do you call on the student? Or do you just like not?
If it's gonna be a long time, I think probably, because you all heard me say this, those of you that have me in 301, you heard me say, please don't make that student leave the room. That may be the only math instruction or spelling or whatever they get that day. Don't make them leave because that's a punishment. It's not their fault that mom or dad either didn't sign it, didn't want to sign it, whatever. I would put them where the camera doesn't hit them. And if I have to call on them, you know, I could point. I could, you know, depending on how the segments are, I might not call on him or her in this segment, but when I turn the video off, the next, you know, 12 minutes the video's not on, I might call on him frequently. But, you know.
I also think too, as long as you just say, Paula, what, you know, that not Paula who lives at,
Right.
you know what I'm saying?
And don't use
You don't use
last
last
names,
names
yeah.
and all that.
Because chances are your videos are not going to escape and get out there, but just that one time is all it would take. So I would do everything I could to get those consent forms. But you will have some that will come back and the parents will sign it, but they'll say no. And that's okay. We don't know what's going on. And I would not stick them way over there in the corner where they're isolated. I would put them at a table that the camera is just not going to reach.
On the other sheet, the instructions, I think that said the 6 things that we want in the video, it said that it's looking for our ability to organize the classroom. What do you mean by that?
Well, those are things that we're going to be able to see. I mean, like if you're teaching your lesson and you're going, oh, I needed crayons, I forgot, and you're running over here and you're getting crayons, and then you come back and you're like, oh, I forgot we need scissors, and oh, I forgot to tell you all, I forgot to tell you to bring a ruler. Does anybody have a ruler that I can borrow? Okay, well, I've already shown you very quickly that I'm not prepared or organized. So it will be obvious when we watch, it will be obvious when we watch you if you look organized. Yes.
So we should probably send these consent forms out like this week or next week?
Absolutely. I'd go ahead and send them out. I mean, it doesn't matter when you're videoing. I would go ahead and get those out because I promise you it's going to take a long time to get them back. And you've got to decide when you have to call it quits. Like I said last week, you might want to give some incentives if it gets to the end of the week and, you know, you have to have them and, I don't know, a little extra here and a little extra there.
So like my teacher has like a little bit of like control issues, like she kind of knows and everything for me as far as it's for classroom. But like when she does it like on the video.
I'm always sad, and it's the same thing, I mean, okay, I'm trying to think. Yes, I have. I don't see it as much at this level as I do like from 301, but I have had teachers take over a lesson teaching math in 301 and just say, oh no, we do it this way, and just kind of take over. So I'm not going to judge you on what the teacher does or says, but if that's the case, I would record another day. That's why you need to keep recording several days until you get one where she or he finally is able to let go and let you have the classroom.
I also think too, when you're sending those video release forms out, I mean, a lot of parents are not going to read every bit of that. I think if you send a nice introductory letter with who you are with it, while you're in, you know, this is going on, I'm in your child's classroom, I've attached this permission slip, because I'm doing student teaching, I have to complete this portion, and just give a brief description of what's going on. So that always seems to click better with parents than that, just the note.
And it's very rare that they don't know or they haven't had a child or at least in a school where there's been a student teacher and they kind of know what goes on.
Is that form on my text?
Yes.
Okay.
And remember, once you collect them, they do not go in your TPA document. You do scan them and you put them in one document and then you upload that as a separate file into live text.
Do not send them to me.
Yes.
Please don't.
And don't attach them to the template for the TPA.
Can we take pictures of it and put it in Word document like you said? Like just have all of them together in Word like that?
So 15-minute videos, you can do as many or as little clips as you want, but just keep in mind, lots of little clips are red flags. And I will tell you, I can, probably every single one that I graded last semester, with maybe the exception of 1 or 2, they were like 7, 8 minutes. And I did not feel like the person who, or the students who did it, showed enough. So it's better to show more than less in your video.
So my teacher's used to like co-teaching. She's always had to, and then the last couple of years, and then she has a Title I teacher. So, you know, at some points there will be 3 teachers at once. Is that okay if you see that in the video, as long as you're still leading?
Yes.
Okay.
So you're going to write a pretest. You're going to give your pretest. That's going to help you determine your unit. You're going to have your standards and your measurable goals. You're going to keep track. Do not get rid of your data from your pretest, please, because it's in task 6, and I'll talk about that. There's no sense in even trying to talk about that today. But the next time we meet, I'll talk about how you need to keep track of all of that. Yes?
So I'm in a classroom with 13 students, but okay, so the 2 first grade classrooms are attached, so there's a door between, and a lot of times the teachers will just keep the door open, and like, they do everything together. Like, we do our reading interventions together, our math interventions, like groups, pretty much everything is together, except for like a couple hours of the day. So, and I feel like I've already like established a good rapport with like the other teachers' kids too, and not just the class I'm in. So could I pick up a student from either class, would that be okay? Or should I just stick to the class, what the teacher that I'm assigned to, one of her 13 kids, or 2 of her 13 kids?
When you teach your lesson, who are you teaching it to, or your unit?
Both classes.
Oh, as long as you're teaching to both, I would say that's fine.
Okay.
But if your unit is only going to be taught to this classroom right here and not this one, I would focus only on this classroom and pick your 2 students from it.
Okay. Yeah, she has already asked me if I'll be able to do it with both classes. And just either move over to her room or have them come over to our room. And I said yes, because I'm not going to say no to her.
Right. I'm going to change my answer.
Are you going to teach them at the same time?
Yes.
Or separate time?
Yeah, I
So
think,
as a whole group?
yes, as a whole group. I think the kids from the other room, they're just going to come over to our room or we're going to go over to her room. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's going to be taught all together, like all 27 kids.
Are you, okay, so outside of your unit, when you're not teaching both classes all the time, every day?
No,
Always.
but we do like
You do a
small
lot of
group
stuff
instruction with both classes. And they assigned me like 2 kids from the class, the teacher that I'm in, and 2 kids from the other first grade group. Like they were having me work with 2 or 3 students. So like 2 from this room and 2 from this room. So kind of, yes.
Or at least you're going to get consent forms from both classes.
Yes, yeah, I have
I guess, and Mrs. Priest can jump in, I guess my response might be, I might change it now, I might say only because you're going to be with the class that you were assigned to the most. I might pick my 2 students from that classroom, but, I mean, if you're pretty equal.
Well, it doesn't, I mean, it doesn't matter, I make 2 students from that room, but.
I mean, if there's a unique situation and I don't guess it matters, since this is just about the unit. But I just want to think,
if she's teaching them both at the same time. Like if she was teaching like group A.
Right.
Maybe going over to group B and teaching them, but since they're all going to be as like one class, I think it might be okay.
was thinking if there
Yeah,
was a
that's
good
why